In the second half of it, obviously, I looked at where the 10 minutes sort of finish and where you've sort of left off. It slid over into into the siloing of people,
Yeah.
and what I would call echo chambers. And I really just don't think that they are very helpful. But again, going back to what we started with at the beginning, it then cuts into someone like Ben Shapiro, who is somebody who sits in this echo chamber before cutting into people like, Noam Chomsky and Cornel West, who are great guys. And you think, mate, come on, give it a rest. And one of the other things that they pointed out in that next section was about something called pattern recognition. That if you have an overload of information,
Yes.
that all you default to is pattern recognition. And I was thinking about that, and I was thinking, well, what is actually wrong with pattern recognition?
We've always done it as humans.
Yes, so what is wrong with that?
Well, nothing. Well, it depends what you're recognising as patterns. And are they there?
I'm up in a tree and I recognise that those four-legged apex predators wandering around, if I get out the tree, they're all going to jump on me and eat me.
Yeah.
Because I've seen that happen. I've recognised that pattern. Therefore, that pattern is one that I will not try and muck about with.
Yeah.
So pattern recognition, it seems to me that it was pitched as a negative thing. Too much information, you just go to pattern recognition. But that is the way that you cope with complex processes. We do that reflectively in terms of the way that our body responds. It's like muscle memory, It becomes a pattern that your body begins to recognise, and it does it by rote.
Yeah.
So I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing at all. One of the other points that they made was that, what people want these days is just short and snappy. That's all that's wanted.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is a conversation that you and I have had over our long-form discussions and our long-form conversations, whether it's on this channel or whether it's on other channels that we both operate. People get bored. They listen to 2 minutes, and their blooming attention span has gone out the window. And again, whose fault is that? Yes, it's societal fault in terms of the way that we allow things to happen. But then when you bring it away from the fringes of society and you bring it into the home, and you've got to go, well, hang about, who's in charge of these kids? Mum is, or dad is, or mum and dad are. Dad and mum, or whatever it is these days. There are parents, adults, who are in charge of these children. And so they should be instilling better things into their kids. They should be saying, no, you can come off that phone. Or, no, you don't need to look at that screen. Let me read you a story. I had my granddaughter with us on Saturday, and she sat there with her phone in her hand. She's 13. I said, what are you doing? She said, nothing. I said, no, seriously, what are you doing? She said, talk. I said, talk what? What, watching a clock? And I knew exactly what she was doing, but I just thought I'd wind her up. So I said, what, watching a clock? She said, no, I'm not watching a clock. TikTok. I went, oh, TikTok, like TikTok. She said, no, it's a video thing. I said, oh, right. So what sort of videos has it gone? Are you learning stuff like philosophy? Is there some Shakespeare that you're watching? And she looks at me and says, oh, Pops, come on. I said, so what are you watching? And she says, I'm watching people eat food.
I know.
I said, what? She said, I'm watching people eat food.
I know. It's amazing. That.
I said, you're kidding me. And she went, no. And so I got my phone and I started to film myself going, I said, I'm going to put that up. It'll go viral, that will. And she's like, yeah, well, this is. I said, why are you wasting your life watching that crap? And said, in fact, put it down. I'm now going to talk to you. And so I made her put her phone down, and then I gave her a history lesson. Which, when she came home, when my wife came home, it's, Nanny, I'm so pleased that you're home. Pops has given me a history lesson. He's talked to me about Socrates. He's talked to me about everything from the ancient Greeks all the way through to what's happening in Britain at the moment and Europe. I can't cope with it. Oh, well, So it comes down to the environment that people are growing up in. It comes down to what you allow people to see. And I think that we're responsible, for goodness sake. And again, I bring this back and I put it under the hat that I wear as a pastor of a church, okay? Every week I could stand up there, I could give a 30-minute syrupy flipping word of encouragement, which I pulled off some flipping top themes off the internet and just banged it all together. And gone, yeah, there you go, get out there, guys, go pray for people, make people well, just say a couple of Hail Marys and she'll be right type of thing. Nonsense, absolute nonsense. My job is to try and build knowledge into people and build maturity into people. And that's what we're not doing very well. We're not building knowledge and maturity well into young people, in my humble opinion.
I think the biggest TikToker is a woman who mimes to songs that she has not created. Often just looking in a mirror for a reflection. And that's it. I saw a video on YouTube once and it was hilarious, and it was about a guy. I don't know if you've heard Aussie Reacts. He's an Aussie guy who does...
Oh, I have seen that, yeah.
This was similar, but it wasn't him, but it was very similar. I forget who it was, and it was saying, oh, look at these idiots. And it's effectively people who were creating videos for TikTok, and the fails and the people falling over and this odd behaviour. I don't have a problem with that, because that's often they're funny, they're very well coordinated. It's no different to a dance troupe or a load of actors. Kudos to them.
And it goes back to like the you've been framed sort of stuff back in the early days.
Absolutely.
Right? So that's funny, entertainment.
But what I don't get, personally, are the music reactors who will sit in a chair and often not even pay attention to the music. There's a couple I've come across, Canadian, who can't even focus on what they're doing. They're not listening to the music. And I said to you before, it's like, could you imagine going into a theatre and you're going down the side, and to the left are all the people that sitting in their seats, and they're all looking forward on the stage. And on the stage is John Williams, who's doing all his music from his films. And you notice someone filming, not John Williams, but the reactor who is in the front reacting. And John Williams is being live streamed and getting half the people watching than the people who are watching the person reacting, who's not even listening. That happens all the time. And it's like, right, how did that happen? When did it that there was a contempt for the creators, but not a contempt for people who react to the creators?
That's probably a spin on Plato's cave, isn't it?
Yes.
When you think about it, if Plato acknowledged that back in his time, then nothing has changed, has it?
No.
All that's changed is the medium that attracts that attention now. So there is something in humans that attracts them to this particular thing of short-sighted, quick fixes, easy comfort, without stretching beyond to be challenged by what lies beyond that bit. I would rather look at the shadows dancing on the wall of the cave than actually unshackle myself and walk out and see what's causing all of this.
Yeah.
And I think that this is a trait of humanity since humanity has existed. All we're seeing is it being played out in this particular medium of social media. You know, I have talked to you about that book on blood, toil, tears and sweat, the great speeches of Winston Churchill. And this book, as I was reading it, 1874 that man was born. Nothing has changed. In 150 years, nothing has changed. Everything that he wrote about is still happening today in just a slightly different medium. And so I think that when we recognise that, and that's where pattern recognition comes in, when we recognise that pattern, it then gives us the opportunity to be able to step either out of the pattern and say, I'm getting off here because I know where this is going to go. Or it gives us the opportunity to plan for what's going to come in the future. We are hardwired to sell ourselves short rather than dig deep and push out into the world beyond the comfort. And unfortunately, the society that we now live in has become so comfortable. What concerns me most, I think, about the society that we currently live in is that when it goes tits up, which it will go tits up because that is the pattern, the society that we live in are going to be so ill-equipped to deal with that the breakdown has the potential to be almost apocalyptic.
You said something that I can't get my head around, and we have talked about this. People today live at a level of luxury and the standard house that they're in than the kings and queens of old ever had. They would be amazed. I'd love Louis XVI to come through and look at the average household and have a conversation with someone, and I wonder what he would say, and listen to the people and what they would talk about. And today they were saying, we want it this way, and we don't have this, and we don't have a freedom of voice. I think they turned around and said, what? You've got everything that we ever dreamt of and you're unhappy, the more we give to ourselves, the more luxuries, the more wealth. And the average person, despite saying that they're paying far too much tax and they're struggling and there's a cost of living crisis, bollocks. Go and live in Africa. The first world problemitis that is coming out right now is shocking. And I think that is half the problem. All these people about talking about where all the clever people have gone, I think a lot of it is that if it has gone anywhere, it's gone into a narcissistic bubble where people think, oh, woe is me, my life is terrible. Is it really?
No, and I absolutely agree with you. I think that we are so fortunate. We are so fortunate to live where we live. We are so fortunate to have all of the things that we do have. And the majority of people that live in Western nations, even if they're classed within that demographic as being on the poverty line, no way. No way. That is just not poverty. As you say, poverty is living in a war-torn zone where there's no running water, you've got no food, you've got no clothes, or the clothes that you have got are the ones that you're wearing, and that's it. If you're lucky, you've got a carrier bag full of all of your worldly possessions. I think that the thing that has happened with the materialistic society that we live in the West is that we have jettisoned the absolute. We have jettisoned the belief in anything metaphysical or theological, and we have replaced it with science will answer all the questions for us, and material possessions will get us through the day, and we will be happy. And you know what? We've learnt that we're not. We are less content. We are less happy. We are less inclined to live a contented, relaxed life, because the more we have materially, the more we want. It's like an addiction. It's like a sugar addiction. You know, the more sugar you get pumped into you, the more sugar you want. The cravings get higher and higher. And this is where we live now. We live in a world we live in a Western world, a materialistic Western world, which, having jettisoned everything that anchors it, has found what it's been replaced with is wanting, very wanting.
I sent you a video from a Norwegian, didn't I? Bjorn Andreas Bull Hansen. He asked the question, what happened to England? I think what he talked about was his trip to England, and you could extrapolate it and say, if there is an issue, what we've just been talking about, it's replicated in other places. Not universally, but a lot of the English-speaking world, I think. Because Jordan Peterson was asked this question about 3 or 4 years ago. He said, why are people in the West, in the English-speaking world, when they get to a certain age, so miserable? And he said it's probably because of lack of exercise and the food they're eating. It's a lot of wheat-based stuff that must have an effect in the gut. But Bull Hansen said, people are so serious, so miserable. It's almost as though no one wants to have a laugh anymore. And I wonder, was that always that way and we've forgotten, or is it recent? Or was it that in the past, that you know, the stiff upper lip?
Yeah.
It's like you used to watch Top of the Pops and people are always having a laugh on there. But now you watch TV, it's so serious. It's so, no one ever bloody cracks a smile.
We talked about this when we were reflecting on my trip to the UK.
Yes.
And one of the things I said, we touched into music and Top of the Pops and that sort of stuff as well, actually. And it's because everyone's become professional. They're no longer just good amateurs. You know, so everything is driven to actually make money rather than actually to just pick up a guitar and play and have fun.
Yes.
And life has become much more serious because everybody is being funneled into the same shape. And if you are outside of that shape, then you don't fit, you're not welcome. And I think that's been one of the problems with the UK. The UK has become very, very, very serious because it's politically incorrect to say anything. You can't crack a joke in case you offend somebody. You can't open a door for somebody these days because you might give somebody some offence that you've opened a door for them. And do you think they really need a door opening for them? What do you think? They're not as capable as you? Just thought you might like me to open the door. Couldn't give a toss who you were, actually, whether you've been pink, green, red, yellow, whatever you are.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Actually, we're recording on the day when somebody at a rally did do a joke, and it's blown up all over the place, isn't it? It's the...
I don't know, I've not seen that.
So it was, had a comedian on and said, did you know right now there is a pile of rubbish in the ocean? It's called Puerto Rico. That hasn't gone down very well, so...
Yeah, but you know what? Are people that sensitive?
Well, the Puerto Ricans
are. That sensitive? But why is everybody that sensitive? when we were growing up, we would make jokes. There's an Englishman, there's an Irishman, and there's a Scotsman, and they walk into the pub. And then you would rip the pea out of the Englishman, the Irishman, and the Scotsman. And you could mix it up, and depending on whether you were English, Irish, or Scottish, or whether you had a mixture of all of those, you could play that one off best.
Yes, but
So what?
yeah, but what about the German and the Jew went into a bar?
What about it?
Well, now, not so much, but probably 20, 30, 40 years ago, there were people alive who would have taken immense distress at that, especially if you equated the Germans to Nazis and the Jews to being persecuted.
Yeah, but now what we do is we equate democratically elected leaders to Hitler.
Oh,
Just because he happens to be
Trump's done far worse.
I mean, Trump and Hitler, come on.
Yeah, well, okay, if that's what she said. But effectively, Trump said he likes Hitler.
He likes Hitler. Did he say he likes Hitler?
Possibly. But let's not get into that.
But you know what I'm saying? Where do you draw the line? I know Rowan Atkinson had some stuff to say about this a little while ago, didn't he? I don't know if you ever saw his speech. Maybe it was at Oxford University or something, or it was part of a freedom of speech debate. And it was very, very good. And he's saying, you should be able to laugh and joke and mock. Nothing should be sacred in those respects. I'm not sure that anything should be sacred. I have worked in some very traumatic and horrible situations, right? And the way that we dealt with that was black humour. And the black humour,
of course,
was
gallows
we would
humour,
laugh.
absolutely.
Yeah, gallows humour. And we would laugh and we would joke and we would make the most ridiculous comments. Why? Because it was an ability for us to just unload some of the stress that we were carrying.
But you weren't being persecuted.
Well, mate, I've been persecuted.
Oh, yeah. It's a thin line. I think there's an issue. If you've got the power and you are mocking minorities, that's not acceptable. But if you are mocking your own, fair enough. But that doesn't happen. It can start that way, but it ends up where, okay, you're laughing at me now. Now I'm going to get you to focus on somebody else. And that's the first step. That's what the worry is. We have a template of seeing this twice in world history in Europe, where this can go. People are oversensitive, I think, because of that. Far too many people on the left are using it as an excuse to beat up on the right and vice versa. It's just being used as expediency to make political hit points. But the problem is the people in the middle, who may struggle to contextualise, see it as a clarion call, and that's the problem. What needs to be taken out is all this at the top level, because there's certain people we want to look up. I mean, if you went to work for a job and your boss started ripping out your colleagues because they look different, you'd think, how the hell did you get a job? And you're not right for that leadership role. It's not good leadership to start doing that with other people. But we're seeing it all the time now in leadership roles, and it's becoming the norm.
Do you think it's becoming the norm in leadership roles?
In politics, it is. Absolutely. And eventually, what's going to happen is going to happen in businesses, certainly with those linked to government. If you get someone in government who derides people in their own country, then government agencies may start following that route. And we know that has happened. Not necessarily in our own experience, but unfortunately in some countries. I mean, can you imagine being in North Korea and criticising the leader?
Well, of course, you don't do that sort of thing in totalitarian states, do you?
Exactly. But if he started taking the rip out of certain people, well, they're not going to survive long, are they?
With the politicians, I think there is a difference between having a politician who stands up and acts like a celebrity, and a celebrity is somebody there who is there to entertain you, which means there should be very few limits. So I'm a bit of a free speech absolutist. I think that people, when they are looking to entertain, should have a very, very broad range and should be able to speak without fear of being locked up by the thought police because they've made a joke or a comment that somebody sat there could find offensive. Anyone can be offended by stuff if they choose to be offended. That doesn't mean to say that the person speaking is meaning to offend you at all. You choose to be offended.
What if the king decided to say, oh, those slanty-eyed people, while on the throne?
So my thing with the politicians, and we could put the king in the same bracket, is the language that a celebrity might use or an entertainer might use has got to be different from those who are statespeople.
Yeah.
The problem is that we no longer have any statespeople. What we have is people who are looking for the popular vote, people who are looking for the short and snappy, people who are looking for the soundbite, people who think that by giving the 10-minute TED talk, they are now the holder of all knowledge. And I think that's wrong. I think that we should be looking for different things from different groups of people. We've got to be looking for different things. Do not look for meaning and purpose from politics. It will not give you it. So our politicians are there to put certain things in place for the benefit of the people that live in the country. That's it. They're not there to control how I think. They're not there to control how I act. They're not there to tell me whether or not there is or not an afterlife. That is not their remit.
Yeah.
They're there to take taxes off me as I work so they can keep the roads going, they can keep hospitals running, they can keep some form of education going in, and they can build a nice defence network around me to keep me safe. That's it.
Yeah.
What I do in my home, what I read, providing it's lawful, I'm not doing strange things with chickens or anything like that, then, providing it's lawful, leave me alone.
You mentioned Plato, the Republic, the cave.
Yeah.
I'm holding up Republic here now. You probably heard me trying to find it just now. This is, in Book 1, what Socrates says is the ideal ruler. For this reason, Socrates said, money and honour have no attraction for the ideal ruler. Good men do not wish to be openly demanding payment for governing, and so to get the name of hirelings, nor by secretly helping themselves out of the public revenues to get the name of thieves. And not being ambitious, they do not care about honour. Wherefore necessity must be laid upon them, and they must be induced to serve from the fear of punishment. And this, as I imagine, is the reason why the forwardness to take office, instead of waiting to be compelled, has been deemed dishonourable. Now the worst part of the punishment is that he who refuses to rule is liable to be ruled by one who is worse than himself. And the fear of this, as I conceive, induces the good to take office. Not because they would, but as a necessity.
And I think there's a hell of a lot of truth in that. And I would sort of paraphrase a part of that to say, if you want to be a politician, then you should be banned for life. You don't recruit
Socrates
people into these
would
roles.
agree with you, yeah.
Yeah, he would, And one of the things that we're talking about in this video, which we've digressed from quite considerably probably, was they quoted Socrates and they were talking about how he questioned the authority and how he criticised major institution, and his goal wasn't to win fans, but what he was looking for was the occasion for others to think for themselves so that there would be intellectual independence. And I absolutely agree with that. I think that we should be encouraging people to think for themselves, and that we should be encouraging people to actually have more independence, that we shouldn't be big brothered and closed down and you will only do this and you will look like this and you will act like this and you will agree with everything I say. We should be encouraging this difference and this freedom of thinking. When we do that, I think we push out of Plato's cave and we push beyond the shadow and we start to see some of the reality around us, which means that we can then be better informed and have better dialogue, and then bring that back into the cave and hopefully drag people out.
But I think our digression was spot on, because what I was going to link it to is, if you listen to what Socrates talk about the ideal ruler, that's not what we're getting. So
no, we're not.
If where are the clever people going? They've gone because they're listening to what's happening above them. It's like if you're a bad teacher or a bad parent, how are the kids going to be? They look up and they reflect what is happening above them in authority. Our people in authority are not doing a good job.
No, I would have to agree with that, and that's the fundamental reason why I chose to leave my last place of work, because I could no longer work in an environment that I did not believe in. So it's a great shame. It's a great shame. The people above us are not doing a good job, but the problem is that they're trying to galvanise themselves into the positions above us, because otherwise there'll be nowhere for them to go.
Yeah,
which is a shame. that they sort of wrapped up on was talking about Carl Sagan. And I found that quite interesting because I know very little about Carl Sagan at all, to my just sheer state of ignorance. He's not somebody that's sat in my purview. I'm not that super interested in science fiction in terms of, spacey type stuff. So
It's like Asimov.
that's probably why. But he's quite an interesting guy by the looks of it.
Yeah.
Know little about, very capable man, very curious man. And I think that's what, since listening to this YouTube channel, I went and did a little bit of research about him, and I thought, wow, he was a very interesting guy, a very curiously minded man who had some great insight into things by the looks of it. Would I agree with him on every regard? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
But that doesn't matter. He's somebody who I can now sort of bring into my purview as somebody that I would look at and go, oh yeah, okay, I'm going to find a little bit more about you. I might read some of the stuff that you've done and see how you go.
He said famously, if we are not able to ask skeptical questions, to interrogate those who tell us that something is true, to be skeptical of those in authority, then we're up for grabs for the next charlatan, political or religious, who comes ambling along.
Absolutely spot on. And I would agree with that sentiment completely.
In fact, that was actually one of the reasons why in Britain, with the Education Reform Act of 1946, that they brought in certain things that would give critical thinking, because the warning had been of what had just happened in the war. When the Nuremberg trials came out and the horror of what had been perpetrated by a very civilized country, you then realized, oops, we got to educate people as to where things could go. But if they're not educated in those things, they won't see it coming.
And again, while the education would play a significant part, there has got to be something more fundamental than that. Otherwise, people will revert. They will become very, very animalistic very quickly. And everything that we value, all of the kindness, all of the love, all of the compassion goes out the window very quickly. And we have had a taster of that in 2020 with COVID-19. With the lockdowns, with the way people were grassing each other up, with all of these things, with the way people were shunning other people.
Yeah.
We have seen that, and it is a very fragile line that society stand on between complete chaos and order. Very, very fragile. And I don't think people appreciate just how quickly these things can change. They can change on the spin of a coin, mate.
I also don't think people appreciate how many bad actor nations want to pull the rug.
Oh, absolutely. Of course. Of course. So we should be very grateful for everything that we've got. We should make the most of everything that we've got. We should recognise the fragility of the societies in which we live in, and we should seek far greater meaning and purpose outside of the materialistic.
Yeah.
And then we'll be better equipped to live a more meaningful life.
Cool. Another great conversation, Steve.
Always good to talk to you, Mark.
As always. I love hearing my voice.
Absolutely, I love hearing your voice as well. It's long form, so most people probably won't get beyond 3 minutes.
30 seconds nowadays, anyway.
Take care, mate.
Take care, mate.
See you later. Bye.